Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. Today I'm going to give you one of my favorite topwater hacks that I know will put more fish in the boat for you. And I honestly don't know why more topwaters don't come right out of the package like this. It is really a simple hack that will help you catch more fish. And it's something that, in my opinion, gives your bait a whole different look that looks much more natural to the fish. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background on where this came from and share a story with you. Today's video is brought to you by the Deep Dive app, which will help you select the best fishing places in the lake with features like the lake level, the current flow, the top baits tool, which will help you select the best baits for certain locations throughout the lake. Whether that's a clear water, stained water, dirty water, it'll choose the best bait for that location, provide you with all the information like what structure, what retrieve, different reel, all of the information that you need to catch the fish. This is in the app. The cool part about this app, though, is it's not just based on areas. It does provide you with specific tournament winning data that has been collected to help you figure out your best choices for baits and locations for whatever region of the lake it is that you want to fish. On top of that, not only does the app provide you with best locations, it gives you water clarity as well. So maybe you're on a lake like Lake Eufaula, where there is a bunch of different water clarity located throughout the entire lake. This will help you identify the clearest portions as well as the dirtiest portions of the lake. Plus, the Deep Dive app has now added the wind effect map, which is going to take all of the different wind conditions for the past couple of days and show you what banks on the lake are being hit the hardest. They also have inflow points that show you different places throughout the lake where your water is being flushed into the lake through different ditches and creeks and rivers, providing you with high percentage places to fish and letting you know what parts of the lake are going to be the best areas after a rain. Check out the Deep Dive app to help you become a better angler. I fished an early season tournament, probably close to 20 years ago at this time, where the bass were just starting to move up close to their beds. And I had a topwater bait that was really generating really well for me. It was this guy right here. Now, this is a Lucky Craft Waketail. This is a discontinued bait, unfortunately. You probably have heard me talk about it on my channel quite a bit if you watch on a regular basis. But this bait really was an eye-opening experience for me during one of the tournaments I was fishing. You know, like I said, these were early season fish. The water temp was probably in the upper 50s. They were starting to get up near the beds, but they hadn't actually spawned yet. And what I found with this bait is I was getting bit better on this than anything else, but it was unlike any other topwater bite I had ever had. So the difference with this bait, so if I take the bait and grab it in the middle of the bait and kind of loosen my fingers, the bait will fall because it's tail weighted just like that. So it'll literally fall down. That's exactly how it sits in the water too. So if the water level is here, the bait sits almost vertical. Now, during that tournament, what I was doing was I would twitch the bait, I would get the prop to spin, it would blow a little bit of water, and then I would just let it sit there. And the bait would sit like this, and all of a sudden it was like watching a bobber. I'd never see any movement, and the bait would just go under. And those fish were coming up, grabbing the tail feathered treble hook and just pulling it down. Caught several big fish that day. We won the tournament with a big bag. It was an amazing, eye-opening experience that really made me recognize how good this bait was. Now, this is where I think the lesson comes into play. I don't think I would have caught those fish had the bait been sitting flat on the water like a traditional topwater bait. The reason I say that is I was fishing a team event. We had other topwater baits rigged up. We never caught a fish that day fishing any of the other topwater baits. Almost every bait or bite came by the bait just disappearing like that under the water. So the fish were very, very lethargic and unaggressive towards the bait. But that tailed treble, that feathered treble hook, they were coming and grabbing it and just pulling it under. So because of that lesson that I learned, what I started doing was trying to find other topwaters that were weighted similar to the Lucky Craft, where they would sit in the water more vertical versus horizontal. And what I found is There's very few topwater baits that do that. It's a very hard thing to find. Most manufacturers do not make baits that sit that way. There are some out there. This is one that I do like. This is the Duo Realis Pencil 110. It's a walking bait, but when sitting still, you can see how that bait sits down the same way, just like that. So this one falls in the category of being one that I like. There's a handful of them out there. There's not a whole bunch. But having said that, you can do a simple hack to make it weighted so it sits that way. Before I share those with you, though, I am going to tell you why I think this is so good. Now, there's several reasons for it. The first, like I said, it sits more vertical in the water. Now, to me, that is a natural presentation or a natural way to mimic a feeding bluegill or a feeding baitfish that's taking something off the surface. You've probably seen bluegill come up to pop a bug off the surface. When they do that, they sit almost vertical. And when they do come in that position, it's a feeding position, which means they're vulnerable to other species looking to eat the bluegill. So if a bass sees a bluegill in a feeding position, they know that that's an opportunity for them to feed. So that's the first important reason. The second is what you'll find is when a bait sits vertical in the water column, you have a portion of it, probably about to where the hook is, that's actually sticking out of the water. Well, when you go to twitch it, what happens is that bait swings down and the front of the bait creates like a slapping motion on the water. It creates a very unique sound, which to me is something that helps trigger those fish. So when it goes from vertical to horizontal, it slaps. The other key with that, though, is if you give it a hard twitch, generally what happens is the nose comes down under the water and will actually dive the bait down. So you can get a lot of these topwater baits to literally dive 6 inches, a foot underwater, and then they come back up, which again is a very good vulnerable position for a bass to feed. I get a lot of bites when I slap this bait underwater, and before that bait comes back to the surface, it generates a lot of strikes from that standpoint too. The last reason is simply for the same reason I gave you that example from that tournament I was fishing. You know, if you've got fish that are unaggressive, that are not willing to break the surface of the water, they'll come up a lot of times and just grab that rear hook. Now, you don't have them hooked great. You usually have them hooked by just one hook. But the key here is you wouldn't have got those fish to bite otherwise. So a lot of times they'll come up and just grab that rear hook. So those are the reasons why I like it. You can't find that really in any other baits. If you have a bait that's sitting horizontal in the water, you can't get it to dive underneath. You can't get it to slap the surface. And you're not going to get those really finicky fish to come up and just barely suck at the bait. Generally, that doesn't happen. Now, it's a simple fix. Now, there's a couple of things that you can do. Generally speaking, when I'm doing a topwater bait, I do like to use some form of feathered treble because I have found over the years that when the bait's sitting vertical, like I said, they'll grab just the feathered treble. So I like that. The other reason, though, is what I'll do to weight them a lot of time is on the shank of the treble hook, you can buy like some solder wire or some lead wrap and wrap it around the shank of the treble hook to get your extra weight, and then your feathered treble will cover over that, so it makes it look more natural. The other thing you can do as well is you can take a split shot and you can crimp the split shot onto the shank of the hook. Now, I personally don't prefer to do that as much because the split shot can potentially interfere with the gap of the hook, which can prevent your hook sets from being as good. But the other thing you can do to add some weight is to add a bigger rear hook as well. Some topwaters are very, very lightly weighted towards the rear, where instead of sitting vertical, they sit maybe a little bit like that. All they need is a little bit extra weight, and adding a larger treble hook will do that. But you can do it to your topwater poppers. You can do it to your walking baits. You can do it to most topwater baits to give it a different presentation that most other topwater baits don't have. And I'm telling you, it can make a world of difference when you're topwater fishing to have your bait sitting more vertical than horizontal in the water. So give it a try. Let me know what you think. If you've seen or experienced this, let me know in the comments section so that others can learn from you as well. Otherwise, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for another video coming out tomorrow.